Imagine a regional power, starting small, that manages to not only defy but eventually dominate two massive established empires across an entire subcontinent.
Hmm.
This isn't just history, it's kind of a living blueprint for how unexpected innovation, sheer resilience, and even internal contradictions can shape the destiny of a nation.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is that the rise of the Maratha Empire from the 17th to 18th centuries in India was far from a straightforward journey, not linear at all.
Right.
It was a multi-generational saga, really, forged in intense conflict and, well, surprising administrative genius, yet ultimately undone by some of the very structures that initially fueled its remarkable expansion.
Today, we're diving deep into your sources, articles, research, historical analyses to unpack this incredible ascent. We'll explore the pivotal figures and the ingenious strategies behind their success,
Yeah.
and then examine the inherent weaknesses that eventually led to their decline. Our mission is to extract those vital nuggets of knowledge, giving you a sharp, nuanced understanding of one of India's most significant indigenous empires.
Definitely.
Get ready for some surprising facts and hopefully plenty of aha moments about how they blended, guerrilla warfare with sophisticated statecraft.
If we look at the bigger picture, the Maratha story is a powerful case study in political transformation. It really demonstrates how a power vacuum, combined with brilliant leadership and widespread popular support, can build an empire from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
And crucially, how internal fragmentation can then dismantle it.
Okay, so let's unpack where this all began. Our sources reveal the Maratha Empire didn't simply materialize out of thin air. It grew from a truly chaotic but surprisingly fertile ground in the Deccan region during the 17th century.
Yeah, fertile is a good word for it, even amidst the chaos. What's fascinating here is how the waning authority of the Deccan Sultanates, these were a group of wealthy, powerful kingdoms that had dominated the region for centuries, created a significant power vacuum.
Right, they weren't exactly stable themselves at this point.
Not at all. These kingdoms were incredibly rich, fueled by international trade in diamonds and textiles. But they were also plagued by constant internal warfare and deep-seated factionalism.
Factionalism, like.
Well, notably, between local Dakinis and newly arrived Afaki elites, this internal decay just left them incredibly vulnerable.
And your sources point out that these declining sultanates actually served as unwitting incubators for Maratha power. How exactly did that work?
That's right. It sounds counterintuitive, but they routinely employed Maratha chieftains, or sardars. Men like Shivaji's grandfather, Maloji Bhonsle, and his father, Shahaji Bhonsle.
So they were hiring the very people who would later challenge them.
In a way, yes. This wasn't charity, though. It gave these Maratha leaders crucial military experience, administrative knowledge in managing their hereditary fiefdoms, known as jagirs, and, importantly, a growing degree of political autonomy. And the constant warfare even honed the mobile light cavalry tactics that became a Maratha signature style. We actually see figures like Malik Ambar, the regent of Ahmednagar, specifically noted for training Maratha soldiers in guerrilla warfare against the Mughals.
Ah, interesting. But there was another colossal player in the Deccan at this time, right? The formidable Mughal Empire, relentlessly pushing south under emperors like Akbar, Shah Jahan, and especially Aurangzeb. How did their presence factor into the Maratha rise?
Well, this is where it gets truly complicated and kind of counterintuitive again. Mughal expansion, which seemed like this existential threat, actually became a catalyst.
A catalyst? How?
Well, Shah Jahan's reign saw the annexation of Ahmednagar by 1636, and then Aurangzeb basically completed the project by conquering Bijapur and Golconda by the late 1680s.
So by systematically removing the other major regional players, Aurangzeb inadvertently transformed the conflict. It wasn't this multi-sided struggle anymore.
Exactly. It became a direct bipolar confrontation between the Mughal Empire and the Marathas.
And what was the impact of that shift?
It was a game changer. It allowed the Marathas to absorb disillusioned soldiers, nobles, and administrative talent from the fallen sultanates. This solidified their status as the singular, primary opposition to Mughal imperial ambitions in the south.
So the Mughals kind of created their own main rival, in a sense.
You could definitely argue that. In trying to crush all resistance, they inadvertently created a more formidable, unified enemy. And you also have to factor in the socioeconomic conditions, which played a critical grassroots role.
When you say socioeconomic conditions, are we talking about the ordinary people? I've seen in the sources mentions of widespread exploitation of the peasantry
Exactly.
under both the Sultanate and Mughal systems, things like exorbitant rents, illegal levies, forced labor.
Precisely. This widespread discontent, combined with the rugged, defensible terrain of the Western Ghats that naturally fostered local autonomy, created a large, mobile, and increasingly militarized population.
Hmm.
The term Maratha itself often refers to a broad social amalgamation of peasant cultivators called Kunbi, shepherds, known as Dangar, and ironworkers.
Okay.
So, a leader who could offer protection, a more equitable system of revenue, and a compelling vision of self-rule could command immense loyalty. It fueled a popular movement from the ground up.
This brings us directly to the pivotal figure, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Our sources describe him as the man who transformed that latent potential of the Maratha people into a formidable political entity.
Yeah.
His life's work, as you mentioned, the creation of Hindavi Swaraja, which translates to self-rule of Hindu people.
And his early life truly set the stage. Born on February 19, 1630, in Shivneri Fort, Shivaji was deeply influenced by his mother, Jijabai, who instilled in him this strong desire for a Hindu kingdom.
Right.
And his guardian, the Doji Khan Deo, provided practical training in administration and warfare, essential skills.
His political career began with audacious defiance, shockingly early. I mean, at just 16, in 1646, he captured Torna Fort, cleverly exploiting confusion in the Bijapur court. That sounds like a very bold move for a teenager.
It absolutely was. And this wasn't a one-off. It was the start of a systematic campaign. He went on to seize other important forts like Purandar and Kandhana.
So he wasn't just a rebel, he was acting like a leader already.
He was operating as an independent political agent from a remarkably young age, consistently challenging Bijapur's authority. His success was largely built on a revolutionary approach to warfare. He perfected Ganimikawa.
Which is guerrilla warfare.
Exactly, guerrilla warfare, masterfully utilizing the rugged terrain of the Sahyadri Mountains. His forces were characterized by incredible speed, mobility, and surprise, allowing them to consistently outmaneuver much larger, heavier Mughal armies.
And we see examples of this in battles like Umberkind in 1661, where his forces reportedly trapped and defeated a Mughal army, or his daring night raid on Mughal general Shaista Khan's camp in Pune in 1663. That earned him the moniker Mountain Rat, right?
Yes, a name that perfectly captured his elusive yet deadly tactics. And the Battle of Pratapgad in 1659 was another huge watershed moment.
Pratapgad, right. The meeting with Afzal Khan.
That's the one. Shivaji lured the formidable Bijapuri general Afzal Khan to a private meeting and, through a really shocking turn of events, killed him. His concealed forces then routed the now leaderless Bijapuri army. Wow. This single event transformed Shivaji from just a regional chieftain into a legendary warlord. And other key victories, like the sacking of the wealthy Mughal port of Surat in 1664, demonstrated his ability to strike at the economic heart of his enemies, far from his mountain strongholds.
So his army wasn't just a ragtag band of fighters then. What was its structure like? It sounds quite organized.
Oh, not at all ragtag. It was designed for agility and merit. Its primary strike force was light cavalry, divided into bargers, those were state-equipped professional soldiers, and shieldars, who were more like freelance cavalry providing their own equipment.
Okay.
And the infantry comprised hardy Malavel foot soldiers and skilled Hedkari musketeers, perfectly suited for that mountain terrain.
And perhaps his most remarkable act of military foresight, according to your sources, was creating a powerful navy, earning him the title Father of the Indian Navy. That's quite a claim for what we think of as a land-based power.
It truly is. But he recognized that control of the seas was essential for protecting the vital Konkan coast and safeguarding maritime trade.
Trade which was dominated by others at the time.
Exactly. European powers and the cities of Janjira had long dominated it, so he invested heavily in building a fleet of agile galabats and larger, gun-equipped gurabs, and established fortified naval bases at strategic locations like Sindhudurg, Vijayadurg, and Kolaba. It was a very forward-thinking economic and military strategy.
Beyond the battlefield, then, how did Shivaji translate this military genius into building a strong, resilient state? Administration must have been key.
Absolutely. Upon his coronation in 1674, he formalized his central administration through the Ashtapradhan Mandal, a council of 8 ministers.
Okay, the Council of Eight.
And a key departure from the prevailing feudal model was that these ministers were paid fixed cash salaries rather than land grants or jagirs.
That's revolutionary. Why was that so important?
because it ensured their primary loyalty was directly to the Chhatrapati, to Shivaji, and the state itself. It effectively curbed the entrenched power of feudal lords who often had their own agendas.
Makes sense.
And he also deliberately used Sanskritized titles for his ministers, like Peshwa and Amatya, to assert a distinct cultural and political identity for his new Hindu kingdom.
And he also implemented that revolutionary land revenue system aimed at promoting the welfare of the peasantry, right? That sounds like a significant shift from what came before.
It was a massive shift. He truly aimed to revolutionize land revenue, instead of relying on the exploitative intermediary class of zamindars and jagirdars.
The middlemen.
Exactly. The middlemen who often acted as feudal landlords and extracted exorbitant amounts. Shivaji created the Raiwari system.
Grayadwar, what did that involve?
It meant establishing a direct relationship between the state and the ryots, the cultivators themselves. Land was meticulously surveyed using a measuring rod called a kathi, and the state share was fixed at a reasonable percentage, typically around 1/3.
Which must have been a huge relief for the
A
farmers.
huge relief, yes. And it also ensured more revenue actually reached the state treasury, not just lining the pockets of intermediaries.
Okay. And beyond his core territory, his Swaraja, he institutionalized those two forms of tribute that became the financial engine of Maratha expansion, Chauth and Sardashmukhi. How did those work exactly?
Absolutely crucial for funding expansion. Chauth was essentially a levy amounting to 1/4, 25%, of the revenue of a territory. It was exacted in return for a promise of protection from Maratha raids.
So basically protection money.
You could call it that, yes.
Right.
And Sardashmukhi was an additional 10% levy based on Shivaji's hereditary claim to be the chief headman, or Sardashmukh of Maharashtra. Together, these levies were a scalable financial model. They allowed the Maratha state to project power and draw wealth from rich Mughal provinces without the huge administrative burden of direct annexation. It funded their military machine.
His grand coronation, June 6, 1674, at Raigad Fort, that seems like a massive symbolic moment. What was its true significance beyond just the ceremony?
Oh, it was profoundly significant, politically and ideologically. By having himself enthroned as a sovereign king, a Chhatrapati, according to full Vedic rites, Shivaji wasn't just declaring independence.
Right.
He was asserting his legitimate authority as an independent Hindu ruler in an era dominated by Islamic powers like the Mughals and the Sultanates.
It's a huge
A
statement.
huge statement. He took powerful titles such as Shakakarta, meaning founder of the Nara,
Right.
and Haindava Dharmotarak, or protector of the Hindu faith. These provided a powerful ideological rallying point for his people. And crucially, despite this strong Hindu identity, his rule was characterized by remarkable religious tolerance. The sources are quite clear on this. He respected and protected places of worship for both Muslims and Christians, and many Muslims served with distinction in his military and administration.
Okay, so after Shivaji's death in 1680, your sources tell us the Maratha state faced its most severe test. A massive 27-year war against the full might of the Mughal Empire, led by an implacable Emperor Aurangzeb.
The ultimate test.
How did this young, relatively new state possibly survive such an overwhelming force, especially when Aurangzeb's stated goal was total eradication?
The answer really lies in a fundamental shift in the nature of the war. It transformed from a conventional conflict between two states into a widespread, decentralized people's war.
Okay, how did that happen?
Well, initially, Shivaji's elder son, Sampaji Maharaj, took the throne despite some internal succession disputes. He largely continued his father's expansionist policies. But then, in a fateful decision in 1681, he granted refuge to Aurangzeb's rebellious son, Prince Muhammad Akbar.
Ooh, that must have infuriated Aurangzeb.
Infuriated is putting it mildly. This act of defiance prompted Aurangzeb to shift his entire imperial court, his administration, and a colossal army. We're talking nearly 500,000 troops to the Deccan.
500,000 troops.
Yes, with the singular goal of annihilating the Maratha kingdom. Sampaji led a vigorous defense, successfully repelling sieges of key forts for several years. However, in early 1689, he was tragically captured at Sangveshwar, apparently due to betrayal. Captured, subjected to brutal torture, and executed on March 11, 1689. Aurangzeb must have believed he had finally decapitated the Maratha resistance.
But your sources show this was a catastrophic miscalculation. The brutal execution of Sampaji didn't crush the Maratha spirit.
Quite the opposite.
Instead, it ignited a firestorm of resistance that galvanized the entire population.
Precisely. The conflict became a war of national resistance, something the centralized, top-heavy Mughal military machine was simply ill-equipped to fight. In the immediate aftermath, Sambhaji's younger brother, Rajaram, was declared the next Chhatrapati. And as Mughal pressure intensified and the Maratha capital of Raigad fell, the Maratha leadership made a brilliant strategic decision.
They moved their capital, didn't they? Way down south.
They did. To prevent the Mughals from concentrating their forces and capturing the king, they moved the seat of government hundreds of miles south to the formidable fort of Jinji, which Shivaji himself had actually captured years earlier.
Smart move.
A brilliant move. It ensured the survival of the Maratha state's leadership and completely transformed the geography of the war. It tied down a significant portion of the Mughal army in a long and incredibly costly siege that lasted for 7 years.
7 years besieging one fort.
7 years. It drained Mughal resources and morale.
So decentralization, in a way, became a strength for the Marathas during this period.
Absolutely. With the king far away in the south, the war effort in Maharashtra devolved to a group of highly capable and increasingly autonomous commanders, people like Santaji Ghorpade and Danaji Jadhav. They operated in independently moving, roving bands, avoiding large-pitched battles, which they knew they'd likely lose against the Mughals. Instead, they focused on raiding Mughal supply lines, attacking isolated garrisons, and collecting revenue from Mughal-held territories.
Classic guerrilla tactics again.
Exactly. This strategy of decentralized, asymmetric warfare bled the Mughal army dry. It turned the vast Deccan plateau into a quagmire for Aurangzeb, and effective power naturally flowed to these successful field commanders.
And then there's Maharani Tarabai, Rajaram's widow. Your sources describe her as a brilliant and indefatigable leader after Rajaram's death in March 1700. It's fascinating to see women in such powerful leadership roles during this era.
It's a crucial detail, often underestimated. Her regency from 1700 to 1707 for her infant son, Shivaji II, was absolutely pivotal for Maratha survival. Tarabai wasn't just a figurehead. She proved to be an active military and political commander.
She led armies herself.
Yes, she personally led armies, forged alliances, and even cleverly adopted Aurangzeb's own tactic of bribing enemy commanders. Her leadership was so effective that even contemporary Mughal historians grudgingly acknowledged her formidable skill and determination. Her regency really demonstrated the pragmatism of the Maratha polity. They prioritized effective leadership over rigid gender norms, especially in a time of existential threat.
So for Aurangzeb, this Deccan campaign became this colossal war of attrition that consumed the final 2 decades of his life and reign. He never left the Deccan, did he?
He died there. The vast resources of the Mughal Empire were just squandered in this endless cycle of besieging and capturing hundreds of Maratha hill forts.
Only for them to be recaptured.
Exactly. Only for them to be swiftly recaptured after the main Mughal army moved on. The war had a devastating effect on the Mughal treasury, its military, and the administration of the entire empire. Aurangzeb's long absence from northern India also led to a significant weakening of imperial control there. That had long-term consequences too.
By the early 1700s, the Marathas, under Tarabai's leadership, weren't just holding their own anymore. They went on the offensive, didn't they? Penetrating deep into Mughal provinces like Malwa and Gujarat by 1705.
Yes, they turned the tables. A despondent Aurangzeb, now an old man, finally seemed to recognize the futility of his campaign. His death in 1707, while still on campaign in the Deccan, marked the definitive failure of the Mughal grand strategy.
And the ultimate triumph of Maratha resilience.
Absolutely. They hadn't just survived, they had emerged from this crucible of war, hardened and crucially poised to fill the power vacuum left by a fatally weakened Mughal empire.
The death of Aurangzeb in 1707 and the subsequent retreat of Mughal forces from the Deccan marked a fundamental transformation. The Maratha state starts morphing into a sprawling pan-Indian empire. But it didn't bring immediate peace, did it? There was internal strife.
Far from it. This is where a period of civil war actually paved the way for empire building, strangely enough. The new Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah, in a clever strategic move, released Sambhaji's son, Shahu, who had been held captive in the Mughal court since 1689.
Releasing him after all those years? Why?
To sow discord. And it worked. It sparked a civil war between Shahu's supporters and those loyal to Tarabai and her son. This led to 2 rival Maratha seats of power. Shahu established himself at Satara, while Tarabai continued to rule from Kolhapur.
Okay, so Shahu, having spent his formative years basically as a captive in the Mughal court, He probably lacked battlefield experience compared to someone like Tarabai.
Exactly. He lacked direct military experience and increasingly relied on his ministers. And this is where the Peshwas come in. This is a absolutely crucial shift in the Maratha power structure.
The rise of the Peshwas.
Yes. In 1713, Shahu made a pivotal appointment. He selected Balaji Vishwanatha Bhatt, a highly competent administrator from the Chitpavan Brahmin community, as his Peshwa, which is essentially his chief minister or prime minister.
And this Balaji Vishwanath was effective.
Extremely effective. He was instrumental in securing Shahu's position, winning over key Maratha Sardars who were wavering, and negotiating a landmark treaty with the Mughal court in 1719.
That treaty, it formally granted the Marathas the right to collect Trath and Sardashmukhi over the 6 Mughal provinces of the Deccan, right?
Correct. It effectively legitimized their claims to tribute across a vast region and provided a legal basis, however tenuous, for their expansion. It was a major diplomatic coup.
And the power of the Peshwa's office grew immensely under Balaji Vishwanath.
Immensely. And when his son, the famous Bajirao Sor, was appointed to succeed him in 1720, the post effectively became hereditary within the Bhatt family.
Ah, so it passed from father to son.
Yes. This institutionalized a fundamental shift in the nature of the Maratha state. Effective political and military power became concentrated in the hands of these Brahmin Peshwas, based in Pune.
While the actual king, the Kshatriya Chhatrapati at Satara,
was gradually relegated to a more symbolic, almost ceremonial role. The administrative capital effectively shifted from Satara to the Peshwa's base in Pune.
Now, Bajirao IV, he succeeded his father at the young age of 19. The sources paint him as a military genius and a visionary statesman.
Absolutely. He articulated a clear and incredibly ambitious policy of northward expansion right into the heart of the decaying Mughal Empire. He famously advocated for striking at the trunk of the withering tree, meaning Delhi.
Strike at the trunk, bold.
Very bold.
Yeah.
And his 20-year tenure of Peshwa was just a whirlwind of military campaigns that decisively established Maratha supremacy over large parts of India.
Like defeating the Nizam of Hyderabad.
Yes, decisively defeated the Nizam of Hyderabad at the Battle of Phuket in 1728, solidifying Maratha authority in their home region, the Deccan. But then he pushed north.
North into...
He expanded Maratha influence deep into northern India, securing control over wealthy provinces like Malwa and Gujarat. His campaigns culminated in a daring raid on the very outskirts of Delhi in 1737.
Raiding Delhi itself.
Almost. And then a crushing victory over a combined Mughal Nizam army at the Battle of Bhopal later that same year. It cemented Maratha dominance.
So how did Bajirao manage to rule such a vast, newly conquered territory? It sounds like a huge administrative challenge. Your sources explain he institutionalized what became known as the Maratha Confederacy.
That's right. To effectively govern such a massive, rapidly expanding territory, Bajirao implemented a pragmatic, if ultimately flawed, strategy. He granted semi-autonomous control over different regions to his most capable commanders.
So he delegated power.
He delegated significant power. This led to the rise of these powerful Maratha houses, the Gaikwads based in Baroda, the Holkars in Indore, the Scindias in Gwalior, and the Bonsals of Nagpur.
Okay.
This created a kind of loose alliance or confederacy of regional chieftains who acknowledged the nominal supremacy of the Peshwa back in Pune, but exercised considerable autonomy in their own domains. They had their own courts, armies, ambitions.
Your sources describe this model as a double-edged sword. How did this structure, which clearly fueled such rapid expansion, also become a profound vulnerability later on?
Well, this is one of the key insights into their eventual downfall, I think. While it was brilliant for fueling rapid expansion, it incentivized ambitious commanders to go out and conquer new territories for themselves and the Confederacy.
Right, they get their own power base.
Exactly, but it also created these powerful hereditary warlords. Their loyalty to the central Peshwa in Pune was often conditional, based on self-interest. This inevitably led to intense internal rivalries and jealousies.
So the structure prevented unity.
Precisely. The very structure that enabled the Marathas to conquer India also prevented them from ruling it as a truly unified, cohesive empire. It ultimately left them fragmented and, crucially, vulnerable to the divide and rule strategy later employed so effectively by the British.
By 1760, under Bajirao's son, Balaji Bajirao, also known as Nana Sahib, the Maratha Empire reached its absolute zenith. How vast was it at this point? Give us a sense of the scale.
It was immense. Maratha armies had campaigned from Peshawar in the northwest, near modern-day Afghanistan,
Wow.
all the way to Bengal in the east, and from the foothills of the Himalayas down to Tamil Nadu in the south. At its peak, the empire controlled or exacted tribute from over 2.5 million square kilometers. That's roughly a third of South Asia.
A third of the subcontinent.
Yes. And the Marathas were, for all practical purposes, the rulers of Delhi. They controlled the Mughal emperor, who was now effectively their pensioner, living under their protection and authority. This truly marked the high water mark of their power.
So what underpinned this vast and rapidly expanded empire economically? Your sources highlight a complex socioeconomic fabric. It combined a traditional agrarian base with this innovative, though often extractive, system of revenue generation.
That's right. At its core, the Maratha economy was fundamentally agrarian, especially within the Maratha heartland, the Swarajya.
Yeah.
Land revenue was the primary source of state income there.
And Shivaji's administration had set up a relatively fair system there.
Yes. Shivaji's administration had taken great care to establish a revenue system that was intended to be both efficient and relatively equitable. Remember his Rayatwari system and the use of the kafi for land measurement.
But as the Marathas transitioned to this pan-Indian empire, their financial model underwent a profound shift, didn't it? It couldn't just rely on Deccan agriculture anymore.
No, it couldn't. The vast military machine of the Peshwa era simply could not be sustained by the agricultural output of the Deccan alone. It wasn't enough. Consequently, the empire's finances became increasingly overwhelmingly dependent on those external levies of Chauth and Sardashmukhi.
Right, the 25% and 10% taxes from other regions.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this system was fundamentally extractive rather than productive. That's the key difference.
So Chauth was essentially protection money, a tax paid by other states to avoid Maratha raids. What were the long-term consequences of relying so heavily on that kind of economic model? It sounds inherently unstable.
It was inherently unstable. While Chauth was a brilliant short-term fix to fund rapid expansion, it was also, you could say, a ticking time bomb, economically and politically.
How so?
Well, imagine an empire built not on integration or development, but essentially functioning like a large-scale protection racket in many areas. This system did not involve investing in or developing the economies of the territories from which it was collected.
No incentive to.
No incentive to. It created a relationship of predation, not integration, which meant that regions paying tribute often viewed the Marathas primarily as plunderers rather than legitimate rulers.
Which breeds resentment.
Exactly. This perception planted seeds of deep resentment that future rivals like the Afghan ruler Ahmad Shah Abdali would easily exploit by forming alliances against them. People were willing to side against the Marathas. That's the fatal flaw in the economic model.
What about commerce and urbanization? Were the Marathas focused on trade, or was it all about land revenue and tribute?
They certainly were aware of its importance. Shivaji's policies, for instance, were designed to protect merchants and secure both internal and maritime trade routes. His creation of a navy, as we discussed, was in large part an economic strategy aimed at challenging the European and seedy monopoly on lucrative sea trade.
And under the Peshwas.
Under the Peshwas, cities like Pune grew into major administrative, financial, and commercial hubs connecting various regional economies. There were efforts, like Baji Rao, encouraging trade and investing in irrigation projects.
But
Your sources note their overall failure to develop a modern, integrated economic system, comparable to that of their ultimate rivals, the British East India Company. This lack of deeper economic integration and development ultimately made them economically vulnerable in the long run.
And what about the society itself? Caste structures, social mobility, and that really fascinating detail we touched on earlier, the role of women in the Maratha Empire.
Well, Maratha society was organized along traditional hierarchical lines, yes, but it also exhibited a notable degree of social fluidity, especially compared to some other parts of India at the time.
Fluidity, how?
The term Maratha itself describes a dominant caste cluster formed over centuries from various rural communities, including peasant cultivators like the Kunbi and shepherds like the Dangar. Military service was a key pathway for social mobility.
Ah, so success in war could elevate your status.
Yes, it led to a process sometimes called Kshatriyatization, where these groups claimed the status and privileges of the warrior Varna, or caste category. Shivaji's coronation was seminal in legitimizing this claim for the ruling Bhonsle family and others.
And Shivaji himself promoted based on merit.
He practiced a degree of meritocracy, appointing capable individuals regardless of their specific caste origin, including non-Brahmins like the Kayasthas and Prabhus, to high administrative and military posts. Competence mattered.
And the sources clearly indicate the significant political power women could wield, which is truly remarkable for the era. Can we talk more about that?
It's one of the most striking aspects, I agree. This was evident from the very beginning. Shivaji's mother, Jijabai, wasn't just a supportive figure in the background. She was a powerful and influential force who profoundly shaped his vision of Swaraja,
Right, she was deeply involved.
deeply involved. Then, as we discussed in the empire's darkest hour, Maharani Tarabai took command of the entire resistance movement against Aurangzeb and personally led it for 7 crucial years. That's extraordinary leadership.
Incredible. Were there others?
Yes, other royal women, like Rani Yasubai, who was Sampaji's wife, also played important roles in governance and diplomacy, especially during periods of captivity or crisis.
So what does this tell us?
These examples demonstrate that within the Maratha political system, particularly in times of crisis, leadership ability and administrative competence could genuinely supersede traditional gender roles. It allowed women to occupy positions of immense authority and influence, which wasn't necessarily the norm everywhere else.
Okay, so your sources conclude that the rise of the Maratha Empire was this monumental achievement, but its spectacular ascent was matched by a decline that was almost as rapid, or felt that way. It seems the very structural characteristics that had fueled its expansion at Confederacy, the reliance on tribute, ultimately proved to be fatal weaknesses.
Precisely. It's a classic case in some ways. The watershed moment, the big turning point downwards, was the Third Battle of Panipat,
Panipat, 1761.
fought on January 14, 1761. The Marathas, under their commander Sadashivrao Rao, entered a decisive conflict for control of northern India against the invading Afghan ruler Ahmad Shah Abdali.
And it was a catastrophic defeat for the Marathas. Why? What went wrong?
Several things went wrong. Your sources point to strategic errors by Sadashivrao Rao. He allowed his large army, which was burdened by a huge number of non-combatants, to be encircled and cut off from supplies.
Okay, tactical errors. But there was more to it.
Yes. Crucially, the Marathas failed to build a broad North Indian coalition. Their predatory revenue policies, the Chhath system primarily, and their constant interventions in local politics had alienated potential allies like the Jats and Rajputs.
So they had no friends in the north when they needed them.
Exactly. Those groups remained neutral or were even hostile. Abdali, in contrast, successfully forged an alliance with key North Indian Muslim powers like the Rohillas and the Nawab of Awadh, who saw the Marathas as a bigger threat.
And the battle itself was devastating.
Devastating. It resulted in the loss of an entire generation of Maratha leadership, including the Peshwa's own heir, Vishwas Rao, and Sadashivrao Rao himself. Thousands died on the battlefield.
What were the long-term consequences of Panipat?
While Maratha power did revive in the north within about a decade, particularly under the capable Peshwa Madhavrao I, the defeat at Panipat shattered the myth of Maratha invincibility. It permanently halted their northwestward expansion. The psychological blow was immense.
So the disaster at Panipat must have exacerbated those inherent centrifugal forces within the Maratha Confederacy that we discussed earlier, the tendency to pull apart.
Absolutely. The authority of the central Peshwa in Pune was severely weakened. And those powerful semi-autonomous Sardars, the Scindias, Holkars, Gaikwads, and Bonsals, became increasingly independent.
Pursuing their own agendas?
Yes, frequently pursuing their own interests and even engaging in destructive internal conflicts with each other. They were fighting amongst themselves almost as much as fighting external enemies.
And this internal disunity, this fragmentation, became the perfect opportunity for the rising power of the British East India Company.
The perfect opportunity. The British, with their centralized command structure, their disciplined armies trained in European tactics, and, importantly, their superior financial resources, expertly exploited these rivalries among the Maratha chiefs. They employed a classic divide-and-rule strategy.
Playing one chief off against another.
Precisely.
And the series of 3 Anglo-Maratha wars, fought over several decades, sealed the fate of the empire, didn't they?
They did. The British systematically dismantled the Confederacy piece by piece. They capitalized on succession disputes and internal jealousies to defeat the major Sardars individually, often isolating them first.
And the final war.
The Third Anglo-Maratha War from 1817 to 1818 was the final act. It resulted in the decisive defeat of the remaining Maratha forces, the abolition of the office of the Peshwa entirely, and the annexation of the vast majority of Maratha territory into the expanding British Raj. It was the end of the independent Maratha power.
So what does this all mean for their legacy? When we look back, what's the enduring lesson from the Maratha story?
Well, the Marathas' rise stands as a powerful example of indigenous state building in early modern India. It really demonstrates the potential for a regional power to successfully challenge and even supplant a declining imperial authority like the Mughals, and later to confront a rising colonial one like the British.
And Shivaji's achievements.
Shivaji's innovations in guerrilla tactics, the development of a navy, the creation of a sophisticated administrative structure, these were remarkable achievements that show real foresight and genius. However,
But there's a however.
there's a however.
Yeah.
The Empire's story is also a profound cautionary tale. Its inability to evolve from a confederacy of often squabbling warlords into a truly unified, integrated state,
Mm-hmm.
coupled with its long-term reliance on that extractive economic model, ultimately rendered it fragile.
Yeah.
You could say the Marathas conquered an empire but couldn't fully consolidate it.
Right.
Their internal divisions and perhaps a failure to fully adapt to the new political and military realities posed by the disciplined, centralized British led directly to their downfall.
What an incredible deep dive into the Maratha Empire. It's such a sweep of history,
Yeah.
from that chaotic Deccan crucible and Shivaji's audacious vision
Yeah.
to the trial by fire against Aurangzeb, and then that huge imperial expansion under the Peshwas, only to face the internal divisions and the formidable British. It's a truly complex and compelling story.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Maratha story really is a powerful reminder, isn't it? It's that the very strengths that propel an entity, whether it's an empire or maybe even a company to greatness,
Like decentralized flexibility.
exactly, like decentralized flexibility or rapid resource extraction, those very strengths can also contain the seeds of its undoing, especially when internal cohesion falters in the face of new, more integrated challenges. It makes you wonder about the long-term trade-offs inherent in any rapid growth strategy.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? As you reflect on the Maratha Empire, maybe consider this provocative thought. What lessons can modern nation-states, or even large organizations today, draw from the Maratha Empire's struggle between centralized power and decentralized strength?
That's a good question.
When does that valuable flexibility tip over into harmful fragmentation? And how do you sustain loyalty and cohesion when your core economic model, in whatever form, might be seen as primarily extractive by those outside the core?
Big questions with no easy answers.
Definitely something to think about. We hope this deep dive has given you a shortcut to being well informed on the Marathas and maybe sparked even more curiosity about the fascinating complexities of history.